and then our planner and Maryam can hear us, right?
Yes.
Okay. So assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special event at the Usuli Institute. My name is Grace Song and I'm the executive director here. And I just wanted to take a few moments to tell you about the Usuli Institute if you're not familiar with our work. But certainly you can get more information online at usuli.org. We are a relatively new nonprofit organization with 501c3 status. And we are an educational institute. We are dedicated to elevating knowledge and critical thinking, especially with regard to Islamic law and Sharia and Islamic jurisprudence. And we do this through what we call the Usuli method, which is a methodology or an interpretation or school of thought, if you will, that is basically, starts with understanding the fundamentals of our faith, the Quran and the Sunnah and the Islamic intellectual tradition. And then we delve into that tradition and try and extract and investigate the moral principles and the moral lessons from our faith, and then apply them to our modern day, so that Islam becomes a vibrant, relevant, meaningful, and very humanistic engagement with the divine. And so we, as part of that, we have educational events, and we record and post everything online, and people can watch on live stream as well. And we try to tackle some controversial issues, difficult issues, and try to engage people and engage their critical thinking. So we've had some very wonderful conversations as part of this effort. For example, we had a conversation moderated by Professor Fadl with Salam Al-Mariyati of MPAC, and also Professor Khaled on the issue of Islamophobia and power. And we had another conversation with Dr. Heather Laird about Muslim mental health, which was really insightful and wonderful. So, and as part of that conversation series, we have the privilege of having a wonderful conversation today with Maryam Ramadan, the daughter of Tariq Ramadan, on a very important issue facing the Muslim community. Just by way of introduction, Maryam has her bachelor's degree in anthropology and developmental studies, and also her master's degree in gender studies with an emphasis on Malian Muslim women activists from SOAS, or the School of Oriental and African Studies.
London, University of London.
At the University of London. Thank you. And Professor Abou Fadl, many of you may know that he's been a professor of law at the UCLA School of Law for now over 20 years. But he also is a specialist in all of the fields that touch this particular issue we're talking about today. So he teaches courses in political asylum and refugee law, in human trafficking, in political crimes, Islamic jurisprudence, human rights. So, and outside of courses, he is also very involved with helping victims of sexual abuse and assault in that capacity, as well as other human rights types of issues. So hopefully this will be a very insightful conversation. And I think with that, what we're going to do as far as the format for today, the professor is going to give a little bit of a brief introduction, then we'll get into the conversation with Maryam and the professor. We'll then open it up for Q&A, and then close out at the end with the finish. So hopefully we are going to shoot to finish within a couple of hours. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, first, assalamu alaikum. I welcome all of you, and I very much appreciate that you took time on Saturday to come for what I think is a critical issue and a very important event. Let me first be very honest that this is not the type of issue that any academic or Muslim intellectual, especially if you work in the academia, wants to get involved with. There is simply a great deal of cost that is associated with touching the problem or a rape case. And especially if you are not working in a legal capacity as an attorney representing one side or another. However, to my mind, this is no small incident or event. To be very honest and frank, Tariq Ramadan is a very unique and special figure in our history as contemporary Muslims. Why? Well, Tariq Ramadan itched his niche in the world of ethical theory, especially what Islam can contribute to the ethical universe of the West. And he is one of the very, very few individuals who was able to engage the mainstream and not be simply locked within a Muslim ghetto. So he was intellectually able to break the various boundaries that enclose Muslim discourses and that limit them to purely internal native discourses between Muslim natives and Muslim natives. And as such, he of course became an extremely controversial figure, not so much in the United States, although we all remember when he was banned from entering the United States when he was offered the position at University of Notre Dame, but especially in Europe, because there are various players in Europe that insist that Islam, in order to integrate itself and for Muslims to integrate themselves in the European matrix, Islam has to revise its ethical structure in ways that would emaciate what we know as the religion of Islam and the tradition of Islam. And the most important contribution that Tariq Ramadan made is that he was able to engage the ethical discourse, refuting and responding to the ethical arguments from a European tradition. Of course, he's a doctorate in philosophy, and that greatly helped in being able to respond philosophically to various debates in Europe, and a professor at Oxford, and that, of course, provides him with a great deal of leverage. But if you don't know his work, it is critical work. It is extremely important. And in my view, not enough Muslims have read Tariq Ramadan's work. So, now comes the next issue. An accusation of rape for an intellectual of this size, whether you want it or not, whether you like it or not, is a severe blow to all of us Muslims. Just as a personal experience, I'll share with you, Tariq Ramadan and I were invited to participate at the university in the Netherlands, at the University of Oslo, on a conference on Islamic ethics and tolerance. And the minute the accusation of rape arose, the conference was canceled. I was notified by the University of Oslo that they're no longer going to hold the conference. I have colleagues who teach Islamic studies and assign readings from Tariq Ramadan's work, and when this case arose, they canceled all the readings in their syllabus by Tariq Ramadan. So, we cannot ignore the fact that not only does this threaten to erase his intellectual legacy, but if in the United States we're a little bit insulated from what's going on in Europe, especially that in Europe it takes place mostly in the French language, but this case has become a space by which the entire population of Muslims in Europe is put in a defensive posture, and has been taken as evidence of the essential hypocrisy of all Muslims and their inability to engage in straightforward speak. It has been taken as evidence that Muslims are, by the premises of their faith, are all double speakers. They all engage in double speak, and they always have a hidden agenda, etc., etc. Okay. So this is why I don't think we can simply ignore this case. What will unfold in it is important for all of us. And I don't know how long we will have to wait as Muslims until another Tariq Ramadan comes along and is able to break through either simple academic boundaries where academics speak to each other and are unable to engage in mainstream talk, or the native boundaries of Muslims where Muslims speak to each other and are unable to speak, to cross that boundary where they engage public intellectuals and philosophers and so on. Okay, so now, this is why I think this is going to have historical ramifications, in my view, and it already has a huge impact for our children, who, you know, God knows with social media how they interact with this issue. Now, there are two separate issues that I'm going to converse with Nadia about, because and both are separate. Maryam, sorry. Called you Nadia, my apologies. To engage with Maryam about, because they're two separate issues. We are all familiar with the presumption of innocence in Sharia and in Western law and in human rights law. And the presumption of innocence is a fundamental article of any justice system. You are innocent until proven otherwise. If you've been following the European media, that's not the way they have been handling this case, or conversing about this case. They pretty much has convicted Tariq Ramadan. If France had a jury system, we in the United States lawyers would immediately petition the court for a change of venue, because they would argue that the jury is too biased and too effective. In other words, all the public has taken sides, either that he's guilty or he's not guilty, but most believe he is guilty. Now, it has bothered me, and this is something I want to vet further, that a lot of Muslims seem to not quite understand what the presumption of innocence is. A presumption of innocence doesn't mean that, well, he's sort of innocent until proven otherwise. A presumption of innocence means that you are innocent thoroughly and completely until evidence is presented. And not just any evidence, but evidence that carries a certain burden of proof. Moreover, it is an article of all human rights law and Sharia law that you have a right to confront your accusers. And standing accused and imprisoned without a confrontation with your accusers is a fundamental denial of due process. So there are two separate issues. The issues of whether Tariq Ramadan has been afforded an opportunity to present a vigorous defense in his own right, a simple issue of legal fairness, and then there is a separate issue of the nature of the accusations, what we can call substantive rights, the nature of accusation presented against him. A lot of, if you've been following the debates and so on social media, it has been an absolute mess. But what troubles me, and this is something I want to is that a great deal of Muslims, I think most of us, have simply wanted to not touch this issue and pretend as if it will come and go without having a lasting impact on all of us. And I think this is a serious flaw in thinking. We're going to talk about the Islamophobic context of in which these accusations arose. And again, my goal is not to adjudicate the issue of issue of innocence. My goal is to look for the issue of fairness in process and substantive rights, and for all of us to be well informed about this. Now, I have to tell you that I was the chair of the Student Conduct Committee at UCLA for 10 years, in which I adjudicated sexual offense cases by student against a student. And in that capacity, I tended to believe every student, every female student that said I was raped by another student. I work with human trafficking victims, and in that capacity, my prejudice, my inclination, is when a woman says I was sexually assaulted by a handler or a pimp, or I was trafficked, I tend to believe that. But here, in these capacities, I work as an advocate. Here, we work as public citizens in which we must uphold certain principles of justice, whether Tariq Ramadan or someone else is involved. My point, and I think it's an important one, that we must be mindful of, from an Islamic perspective, the sin of deciding on someone's guilt without the adequate burden of proof presented in a case. And this is simply a matter of Sharia law. I'm not sure all of you are familiar with that. But I'm not seeing it actually practiced, and that's problematic in my view. Why the conversation with Maryam? And again, I don't know how much you have followed what is going on. The accusers in this case, because Tariq Ramadan has been imprisoned and kept in solitary confinement, he speaks through two venues, either his lawyer or his family. These are the two venues in which we have been hearing Tariq Ramadan's side. For the lawyer to speak, it's very expensive on the family. And all of us must be aware of that. It costs money. So if I would have the lawyer here in a conversation with me, I have to think of the cost that the family will have to incur. So the only other option, since we don't have access to Tariq Ramadan, are those who can represent his position, i.e. his family. The accusers have been pretty much vetting their case through European media and even Egyptian and Arab media. Hindayari has appeared in Egyptian media and has appeared in several other Arab venues. So the accusers have had the opportunity to present their case time and again and again and again in the media. There's a fundamental issue of unfairness. If you are hearing from one side repeatedly, we should all care that a Muslim scholar is not given the opportunity to present his side, except with certain attached burdens that make this a very cumbersome process. I wouldn't have liked to have put Maryam in a position where she has to speak for her father. I think that's fundamentally unfair, but we don't have any other option. All of you can think of your children, and if your children had to do what she's doing, I don't think any of our children would be happy about that. It's extremely uncomfortable to be asked, especially accusations of this nature. but the family is having trouble paying their legal fees, and all of us must be aware of that. When you defend, and any of us could stand accused because all it takes is for someone to say, you sexually assaulted me. And this could happen to any of you. As simple as that. And then you will be confronted with the burden of coming up with legal fees. And as a lawyer, I can tell you, that's no small burden. I charge $600 an hour for my work, and that's the norm. Can you imagine having to come up with this type of money for every hour that an attorney spends on your case? And they are having, and we'll talk about that, quite a bit of challenge in meeting their legal expenses. Okay, so let's start the conversation, and I hope that this will vet out the case so that all of you at least can meet your burden for Allah as to what position you've taken or not taken. Okay, Maryam, Salaam alaikum. Again, my apologies that I have to put you in this position, but I don't think we have a choice. I think all the Muslim community, everyone in the Muslim community must be educated about what is going on and take an informed position before Allah and before their conscience and so on. So let's start with at the very beginning. Does she hear me?
We can't hear her.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
No.
Okay. Can you've heard me, right? Okay. I know that Hind Ayari initially wrote a book. In this book, she claims that in 2012, I believe, a sheikh sexually assaulted her. For those who have not read the book is in the style of a testament of her journey from what she calls militant extremist Islam to an Islam that is moderate, and she, in the style of a native informant, I have to use that expression, she shares with her readers how horrible it is to be within an oppressive Muslim context, and why she migrated from that context to liberty. And there's a reference in the book about a sheikh assaulting her. Later on, she announces that it wasn't a sheikh that assaulted her, it was a Muslim philosopher, and that's Tariq Ramadan. We all know that Tariq's initial response was to sue her for libel. Eventually, she filed a criminal case. How did your father get to be detained in France? Did you hear me?
So, first of all, assalamu alaikum to everyone, and thank you for story.
Can
Yes.
you yes, can you?
Yeah, we
Yes,
can hear
we
you.
can.
There's just a lag.
It's just a lag in time, so just go ahead and speak.
Is that, as you clearly explained, Hinda Ayari posted a Facebook message in October 2017 saying that, claiming that she had been raped by my father, Tariq Ramadan. And then what happened is that a month later, another woman came out and she said the same thing, that she had been raped by Tariq Ramadan. So what happened is between October and January 2018, 31st of January, when my father was asked to be questioned by the police, the investigations started about these two rape files, rape cases. And during those 2 months, what we have clearly seen now is that from the start, the judges had decided that no reality of these charges. So why do we say that? We say that because they have not looked into the profiles of these women. They have not looked into the stories and on the how true these stories were. And when my father went voluntarily on the 31st of January in Paris to be questioned by the police, he straight away, when he went into the questioning, realized that through the questions they were asking, through the positions they were taking, that they had already decided that he was guilty. So what happened exactly? Why did they decide to keep him locked up? So they decided this because these two testimonies, these two stories of these two women who supposedly know each other, came from two different cities, Paris and Lyon, where one happened in Rouen actually and one happened in Lyon. So that these two stories were very similar in the way the rape was done. And these two women didn't know each other. And for the first one, Hinda Ayari, she gave the dates, and she gave a date and she gave a hotel. And with the minimum investigation they did, they realized that on that day, my dad was effectively in that hotel and in Paris. And for the other dates of the second plaintiff, her name is Christine. That's her the name that was given by the police because she testified under X. That basically the date and the place were also a place where my father was, which was October 19th, 2009 for the second one. So based on the stories that looked similar, on the dates that were actually the dates where my father was in these cities, they decided that my father might have done these rapes, might have done these rapes, and decided to lock him up.
Was your father aware, or through his attorney, that there's a chance that he was being arrested and charged by the French police, but when he presented himself for questioning in France?
Of course not. We had no idea it was going to turn this way at all, because he knew from the start that he didn't know these women. He knew from the start that all these were fake accusations, and he trusted the judicial system. He said from the start, I'm not going to talk publicly about this case. I'm going to wait to speak to the judges to explain my side of the story, knowing that he from the start said that he denied all the accusations and knew that these were all these were all fake accusations, and that the testimonies were not true. The stories were not true. And therefore, we thought that the judges knew that and wouldn't keep him.
But Maryam, what most people think immediately is that why would these women accuse your father of a very violent rape, and not just a sexual assault, but a sexual assault with elements of torture, urinating on them and so on? What possible motive would they have if it wasn't true?
To be honest with you, we don't know what their motives are. What we know is that we know the background of these women. We know that one woman was proclaiming herself to be an ex-Salafist who has the support of all the Islamophobes, who's invited on all TV channels talking against Islam. And this is the kind of support she has. Then on the other side, we have one woman who's actually from the National Front, who's been working on the Marine Le Pen, who was the National Front candidate. She was working on her website. So we know that these women have backgrounds and they have agendas. This is the only thing we can question. How come they, what's their motives? We don't know. And on top of that, what we know is that they had connections with specific people whose life mission was to destroy my father's work and reputation. And this we know since 2009. We know that they were in touch with people like Caroline Forest, who was the well-known Islamophobe, who wrote a book on my dad full of lies, and who's been campaigning against my father for the past 20 years. She was in touch with these two women. We have someone else like Alain Soral, who's also a well-known Islamophobe, who was in touch with these women. So these women are not just two random women who came out to file rape claims. No, these women have connections, they have agendas, and again, as I explained in the beginning, they knew each other. They began to lie to the judges by saying that they didn't know, and they had at one point to actually explain that they knew each other since 2009.
Okay. can you say something about the prosecutor who has been assigned this case? Because he has a certain legal history that is rather well known and a very clear record.
Yes, he's actually, Merlance is actually a prosecutor who deals with the terror, and he is suddenly in charge of my father's case, which is rape crime. So this is also, during this whole case, we're asking questions. How come there's someone who's in charge of terrorism who's dealing with my father's case? How come during the investigation, they did not look into the back of these women? How come, they're sorted? Because now, for each of these women, the testimonies are not holding up. There's so many contradictions, so many lies, and the more and more the investigations are going forward, the more and more we're realizing that it doesn't make sense. There's clearly something wrong. So if I take, for example, the first woman, Hinda Ayari, she initially started by saying that she was raped on the first week of April 2012 in the holiday in Paris. And the generations, they realized that actually the first contact she ever had with my father was on the 26th of April 2012. So when the judges asked her, they told her about how come you were raped on a day prior to actually you even being in touch with him. She just said, oh, it's true, that seems very weird. So now our lawyer is questioning. He's saying, so how come she knew the hotel where my father stayed at in the first week of April when she actually wasn't even in touch with him? Who gave her that information? And after that, a few weeks later, she came out with a new date and a new hotel. So she said, I was actually raped on the 26th of May in the Crown Plaza Hotel. And she came with a notebook. It's written on it that she was going to see him on the 26th of April. She came with a train ticket saying that she went on the 26th of April to Paris. She came with a receipt from a hairdresser showing that she actually went to do her hair before seeing him. And now we have photos and videos and the testimony of her stepbrother and her proper son, who came and said she was actually on the 26th of May at her brother. And now we don't have a date, we don't have a place, and however the judges are still saying that her responses are hesitant. They don't even say that they are lies. So our lawyer is saying, how come you can even say that it's hesitant? Because she came with proof saying that it was on the 26th of May, and now we're realizing that it's actually not proofs.
Just so,
it's lies.
If I can,
she lied about the fact that she...
Maryam, if I can just summarize what you've said, because sometimes you cut out and people might not be able to get all the details that you've... What Maryam is basically presenting is that there has been a great deal of inconsistency on part of Hinda Ayari as to the date in which this alleged sexual assault took place. By the way, and the inconsistencies also carry over to what she's said in numerous interviews on television. Some of the dates that she alleged were dates that, upon investigation, turned out to have been before she actually met Tariq Ramadan at all. And then some of the dates that she gave upon revision were dates in which she was attending a wedding, her brother's wedding, and including testimony presented by her own family that contradicted the allegations she made as to when the sexual assault took place. So I'm trying to just summarize what Maryam is. Did everyone follow that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back. How about Christelle? Has a confrontation taken place between your father and the second accuser? Your father has been now detained for 6 months. Normally, you don't detain a defendant for beyond 2 weeks without confronting the defendant with their accuser. So has he confronted his second accuser?
He saw Christelle. So he confronted on the 1st of January when he was initially questioned, but it wasn't in front of the judges, it was in front of the police. So therefore, this doesn't count in the fact that he's supposed to confront her in front of the judges. So 5 months later, after he was incarcerated, the judges gave the dates of the 18th and 19th of July for him to confront the first plaintiff and the second plaintiff. So that was the 18th and 19th of July. One day before the confrontation with Christelle, she sent a note to the judges saying that she was sick, that she couldn't travel, and that she couldn't be seated for too long, and therefore she canceled the confrontation. She sent a note from her doctor, which is actually an assistant doctor, with no even an explanation of what her illness was, just that she couldn't make it to the confrontation. And therefore, the confrontation with her has been pushed to 2 months. So we're now waiting for the 18th of September. So because she didn't come on the 18th of July, we now had to wait 2 extra months for him to confront this woman.
You know, just people might say, okay, you know, all of this is just arguments about the evidence or the lack of evidence. Fine, well, he'll have a trial and the truth will come out. What's the problem? What is the problem with your father continuing to be detained? Why should the Muslim community be concerned about his continued detention? He'll eventually have his trial and the truth will come out, and leave it. And that's the attitude of quite a few people. Let justice take its course. You know, a state of trusting the legal process to run its course and saying, well, you know, basically if he's detained through the process, that's not the end of the world. How would you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I think we need to understand that we don't even know if there's going to be a trial. My father has been now in preventive detention for 6.5 months, and everything has been denied to him. He's in solitary confinement. He is unable to have access to his own file. He is sick. My father has multiple sclerosis. He has lost more than 11 kilos. He's unable to walk. He's unable to sleep. He's been completely drugged by medicine. He can't concentrate for more than 20 minutes. Like, his health is deteriorating, and this is very, very, problematic. It's very scary because his health is deteriorating day after day. But most importantly, what is very problematic with this case is, as you explained at the beginning, there is no presumption of innocence. He has been found guilty from the beginning. He's been denied everything by the judges. Mm-hmm.
Do you trust a fair trial, considering everything that has taken place? Do you trust that if a trial takes place, would you trust a fair adjudication?
No, I'm very scared because we're seeing now that since my father has been incarcerated, the investigations are going forward. We're having more and more evidence of the contradiction, of the lies of these women, of the connection that these women have, and my father is still imprisoned. And this is what is scaring me the most. At one point, when we don't even have a date, we don't even have a place for one of these women, and my father is still imprisoned. For the second one, Christelle, we can see from her story that it doesn't make sense. That her story is so big. The story doesn't make sense. For example, so if I can give you a bit of a background of the second story, because it's also very problematic. So this woman says that she met him in a hotel, and then he took her to his room. He raped her, locked her in the hotel room, went to the lecture, took all her clothes and the phones of the hotel. He even unplugged the phone of the hotel, put it in a white bag, all her clothes, left, gave a lecture, and came back, continued to rape her, and then she was able to escape at 5 a.m. So during her whole story, she explains that she met 5 people. She met the receptionist, she met the guy in charge of the floor of the hotel where the room was. She met a person who was doing the room service, because while my father was giving a lecture, this woman came in to clean the room, saw her. Christelle screamed, "Help me," and the woman looked at her and closed the door and left. And then she said that at 5 a.m. when she was able to escape, she was completely beaten up, her clothes were completely ripped, her heel was broken, that she was able to leave the hotel room. She went into a bus, spoke to the bus driver. The bus driver saw the way she was and how shocked she was, told her that she was able to go in the bus without paying. And then after that, she went to a police station. She went in. She said, I was raped by Tariq Ramadan. The policeman looked at her, laughed, and then she left and she went back home and showered. That's the story. Out of the 5 people that she supposedly met on that evening, the investigations that have been ongoing have not found one single person of these 5 people. The only people that were able to find were all the bus drivers who were driving the buses on that night at 5 a.m. and none of them remember this woman. So, we can see that there's clearly something wrong going either with the investigations, or the judge is doing their job, or the investigators doing their job. Who is being listened to? When you know that he's in prison now for the past 6 months and a half for this kind of stories, you actually wonder if you can trust the judicial system.
Okay, you know the book written called Brother Tariq, right?
Yes, of course.
And who's the author of that book?
Khaled for us.
And so
Carolyn Forrest.
Carol Frost.
Carolyn.
Caroline
Forrest.
Caroline Frost. Now, she's a prominent Islamophobic figure in Europe, a very prominent Islamophobic figure. Now, what is her connection to this case?
She's behind this woman. She was in touch at the beginning in 2009 with Christelle. She met Christelle, who told her that she was raped by Tariq Ramadan, and she took her to see a judge. They met this judge, the judge Debak. She explained the story, and then after that, nothing happened. We don't know what happened after that. And then we know now that Caroline Forrest was also in touch with Hinda Ayari before the files were the rape charges were the rape claims were charged. So she is behind these 2 women. She has been for the past 20 years, and trying to really destroy my father's reputation, my father's work. We also know that during the investigations, the investigators found that there were 4 numbers that these 2 women had in common, and one of these numbers was actually Caroline Forrest's number. One of the plaintiffs called this number more than 200 times, and the other woman called her more than 160 times. So, for example, when it comes to this, we know that these phone calls were made between May and November 2017. Up until now, so 10 months after the complaints were filed, our lawyer has asked where these was made. Was it in May? Was it closer to November? When was it exactly? And as of now, we know that the judges have these information and they're still not willing to give it to us. So we ask questions. How come the judges have this information and we're not having access to them? How come they're dealing with this case in this way? So these are all questions that we're asking.
Okay,
and we can't. Yes.
Go on. Because of
yes. So of course, after questioning all this, we can all wonder: can we actually trust the system?
Let me summarize some of the basic points because I think they're rather critical. Again, normally when we have a woman alleging sexual assault, our sympathies, our natural sympathies, go towards the woman. I think that's a fair statement. Correct?
Right.
The problem, though, in this case, is that there has been a historical and rather long-term arch enemy of Tariq Ramadan. If you've read the book Brother Tariq, it's a typical Robert Spencer, Daniel Pipes type of text, which basically says, don't believe that Muslim, everything he says is a lie, because Muslims are taught by their faith that it's okay to lie when it comes to the kuffar. And that basically Tariq Ramadan is engaged in an ongoing process of taqiyya. What Maryam is saying and what I've investigated as well myself, and you can do the same investigation that I've done, is that Carol Forrest, the author of that book, has had a long history prior to the sexual assault claims with both accusers in this case. And there is evidence that suggests that they've coordinated the storylines before these charges was made. Now, let me come back to the point that that matters a great deal. Why should the Muslim community care? I mean, let's say your father, and let me just add one more thing about the accusations. Our sympathies normally go to the women, and are with women who allege sexual assault. There is a history, however, that I feel that the Muslim community is not educated about. And that's the history of racially motivated sexual assault claims. There's a long history in the United States of white women that accused black men, sometimes Asians, of sexually assaulting them, and there's a long colonial history of white women accusing Indians, accusing Arabs, accusing Algerians of raping them and the track record, both in racial history in the US and colonial history in France and in the Netherlands and in England, whether in India, in Egypt, and Algeria, is that immediately the native, the racial male, is immediately supposed to be, or adjudicated, or adjudged to be guilty. Now, what troubles me in this case is I'm seeing evidence of, once more, of this racial process. But Muslims resist becoming racialized or being seen as racialized. But you must understand that Islamophobia is anchored in a racialized paradigm. A lot of Islamophobes don't care about the facts of your religion. They care simply the idea that Islam is the religion of the Arab man, or Islam is the religion of the Turkish man, or Islam is the religion of the Persian man. And so there's a further thing, and that is the prominent role of native informant when it comes to these type of racialized dynamics. Native informants are basically when people in the West, former colonizers or current colonizers, however you want to see them, basically co-opt a native from within the ranks of whatever group here, the racialized group, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Arabs, and get them to testify as to the truth of the assumptions of the colonizers. That's why I call Hindayari a native informant, because she affirms. Now, by the way, she's coming to the United States. If you thought that we're free out of, Robert Spencer has built a relationship with her, and he's sponsoring her for a hot tour in the U.S. A lot of people tell me, no, you must believe the woman and ignore the racial element. I find it extremely difficult to do so when I listen to the discourses taking place on French media and European media. Because the fact that Tariq Ramadan is the grandson of Hassan al-Banna is mentioned ad nauseum. How is that relevant to a criminal case? He could be the grandson of I don't care, a cow. It doesn't matter. Forgive the expression. But anyway. But consistently these tropes, these prejudices, these Orientalist stereotypes about Muslim men and how Muslim men interact with women, what phrases were used, the amount of violence, the framing of the violence, repeat so many of the colonial narratives of white women who claim to be sexually assaulted by natives. Now, as a lawyer and as an academic, I'm bothered by that, and I'm deeply troubled by that. But Maryam, let's go back. So why should the Muslim community care? I mean, most Muslims so far in the United States have simply let you guys fight your battle. They have not said a word. I know there's a petition that has been signed by many academics. Many legal scholars have protested what is going on. But Muslim communities in the U.S. have largely been silent. They don't want to get involved in some hot mess. Why should they care?
It's true what you've been saying, and I think we as a family have to be at the forefront of this struggle. But at the same time, it's true that we expected more from our brothers and sisters in Islam. And I can testify that, my father, he sacrificed a lot for this community. He sacrificed a lot for the Muslim leaders, for the organizations. How many times they did not come with us on holiday or leave us because, he had promised an organization in the US or anywhere else in the world that he was going to give a lecture, he was going to speak at their conference. And now we see that because of rumors, and this is, for us, is the most troubling, is that everything is based on rumors, and people are willing to remain silent and not be part of this struggle because he heard that someone said that, it was said that, everything is based on rumors. And this is, for us, I think, is the most saddening thing, to realize that, some people have been silent or are not speaking out because of this. And, I really hope that what we're doing now, the fact that we're talking about it, that you're hearing, the family speaking out, which is, as you said in the beginning, it's not an easy task for us. We've never been public, we've never spoken public, and now we're facing a situation where we have to speak because we need the truth to come out. And what I also want to say is that, I forgot what I want to say. No, it's been very difficult, and I think that the Muslim community has to come out and has to speak against these injustices. And in the beginning, I would always say to people, as the parents keep asking you to ask for a due process, he's not receiving a due process. He's not receiving the same treatment as other in the same position as him are receiving. If you look at the case of France, for example, we have 2 ministers, 1 politician, 1 producer, famous people out there who've been accused of the same thing, but they're continuing their life, they're not in preventive detention. Out of all the people who have been accused of rape around the world, he is the only one in prison. And now, because of the investigations are going forward, because our lawyer keeps on saying that this file is empty, for me it's very difficult now to ask people to just say we want due process. Now the investigations are going forward. We're seeing that the stories of these women are completely falling apart. We have more and more proof that these are all lies. I cannot understand why. It's very difficult for me to understand the silence of the Muslim community.
So you're disappointed in the American Muslim organizations that they have not taken a stronger position?
Well, I'm disappointed in the fact that it's all based on rumors. Like, from what we're hearing from here is all based on rumors. Oh, he might have done that, this might have happened. These are all rumors. My father is still alive. Wait for him to come out and explain what has actually happened. Don't decide yourself what has happened. It's judicially and religiously wrong to base your ideas on rumors. And on top of that, he is in prison because he has been of crimes that he hasn't committed. And we are fighting for this. We're fighting because these crimes he hasn't committed these crimes.
Before I continue with some other questions, I want to explain something, or just make it very clear because it's implied in what you said. Any person accused of a crime, when they stand as a defendant, in order to be able to defend yourself, normally what a defendant needs is access to a lawyer, access to your legal file, and access to your support system, your family. If you are denied access to these 3 things, it becomes very difficult to defend yourself. Now, Ramadan has been denied access to his file, which is a legal problem. And that has troubled legal experts from all around the world. And he has also been denied access to his family, which is severely regulated because he's kept in solitary confinement. Now, how many hours in the day does he spend in his cell, Maryam?
It's approximately 23.5 hours alone in his cell.
So
out of the 45, we have been denied access to him for the first 45 days. So you have to understand, he went voluntarily to see the police on the 31st of January. The moment he got in, we haven't heard from him for 45 days. No phone calls, no access to him, no letters. We found out through the media that he went 3 times in emergency at the hospital. We had no idea why. Our lawyer had no idea why. And this was 45 days. Very, very long.
Does he have access to a computer and a
45 days. And as of now, solitary confinement, he has minimum access to the family. He has the only people who are allowed visitation are his children, his wife, and 2 of my uncles, and my brother's wife. And the letters, 3 months of letters have disappeared. So people have been writing to him. We have like hundreds and hundreds of people who said they wrote letters to him. 3 months worth of letters were disappeared. We don't know where. He has, of course, he's in solitary confinement, which makes everything very difficult in the prison. So they're supposed to give him 1 hour where he's able to go out, but they usually ask him to decide between breakfast, having a phone call with his family, or going out for 1 hour. So of course, when you're in solitary confinement, every minute you can talk to him on the phone is very important.
Does he have access to a legal library and a computer?
No, he has access to nothing. Nothing. He's not allowed to see anyone. No one is allowed to see him. He has the minimum phone calls he has is with his family, a few hours a day. It's not even a few hours, it's a few minutes a day. He is receiving minimal letters. Like, we don't know how he's not receiving all the letters that are being sent to him, because people are telling us, we send letters and he's not receiving them. And solitary confinement.
Maryam, let me then ask you a further question, because a lot of Muslims simply say to me, maybe the Islamophobes have fabricated these charges, but Allah is punishing him because he has engaged in sexually inappropriate behavior. He must have taken advantage of women or had affairs. I have someone who told me that he has it from an absolutely reliable source, that your mother is divorcing him because he admitted to having affairs. And a lot of Muslims simply say, let Allah punish him for his sexual adventures. What do you say to that?
So we've been hearing that as well. We've been very shocked. I'm personally shocked to know that my mother would have potentially asked for a divorce. Like, of course, this is untrue. This is unfounded. All this is based on leaks and rumors, and you have to understand that these leaks and rumors are coming from the lawyers, the one who initiated all of these rumors going on in the media for the past months now.
Well, how could there be smoke without a fire, Maryam? I mean, if there is smoke, there must be a fire. He must have done something.
Yes, exactly. And as he has once said, he said, yes, people say that there's no fire, but we have to know the fire. And I think this is very important. He said this years ago. This is extremely important in this case. Who actually lit this fire? Who actually lit the fire? Who's behind this? Who are these people behind these women? Who are these people who are trying to break his reputation, break his message, break him and his relationship with his family? Who's actually trying to completely isolate him from the Muslim community?
So
who's behind? And are they are they winning? Are they able to fulfill what their initial plan was?
So are you saying that he did not admit to having affairs?
No, he did not admit to having affairs. These are all leaks and rumors by the plaintiff's lawyers.
Okay, I'm going to take questions from you guys now. So feel free to ask Maryam any question or ask me any question if you wish.
How many, how many cases are there? There's two that we talked about. Are there other cases active or?
How many cases are there, Maryam? We talked about 2 accusers, and the question is about how many cases are there?
Okay, so now he is in prison because of these 2 women, Hinda Ayari and Christelle. There was the third one in France, but he was not indicted because there was not enough evidence or proof. So she hasn't. Nothing has been filed with this woman. There has been a complaint in Switzerland, but in Switzerland nothing becomes official until there is a confrontation. And as he's still in the prison and he still hasn't confronted her, exactly what's in the file in Switzerland. One that we know from the Swiss plaintiff is that she was actually in touch with the 3 French ones since 2009, and she's also in touch with Forest, and she's been yes. So they're all in touch, and they all know each other since 2009.
So the Swiss complaint. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And the stories again are very similar. Her story, the French woman, the Swiss woman's story, is similar to the 2 French ones.
The woman in Switzerland is also within the circle of Forest and Hendayari and Christelle. In other words, they're part of the same group and the same circle of interactions and communications that have been going back and forth before the sexual allegations were made. And I want to make this clear because there's a paper track record that we can examine and investigate.
She's also in touch with the French second plaintiff, Christelle's lawyer. So Christelle's lawyer has been going around looking for extra additional plaintiffs, and he's in touch with this one.
Okay, now how about the rumors of there's a woman in the United States that has brought charges against him?
So these are actually only rumors. As of now, it was only a Facebook post by one woman. I think you guys know. She wrote a Facebook post saying that one woman in the U.S. had filed a complaint for sexual harassment. But as of now, we have no information or nothing about this woman.
I want to let everyone know here that there's a new campaign. So far, it's against academics, where they list academics as racists. Do you know the name of the website?
Rate my racist professor.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah, I'm on that website as a racist. And like Tariq Ramadan, I'm also accused of being Ikhwan, of being Muslim Brotherhood. By that site. If I was Ikhwan, I would proudly say it, but I'm not. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is that I can testify from my own research, that both as a lawyer, as an academic, that the idea of bringing sexual allegations against Muslim intellectuals have been percolating since 2000 among Islamophobic circles in the United States and Europe since 2010, 2012. The exploring of the implications of that. Now, I am troubled by that. I am troubled by that as a researcher, and I think that if Tariq Ramadan and his family is confronting this, who's next? If this passes, who's next? Go ahead.
I mean, the character defamation and that method has been widely used in the Black American community, against the Black American community, against other racial communities, the Latino community, the civil rights activists, and so on and so forth, for a long time. And now it's our turn, it seems. My question is, where are the ACLU equivalent groups in France and other civil liberties sort of groups petitioning for Dr. Tariq's rights as it relates to, trial and so on and so forth, his legal rights. Where are these groups? Where is there any voice anywhere in France that's calling for him, that has any weight, that's doing anything?
Maryam, did you hear the question, or do you want me to repeat it?
I heard the question. No, so what you have to understand from France is that it's completely locked down. Like, it's very difficult to have any kind of rational conversation about this. It's in the Me Too campaign, so people are very scared to speak out. It's Tariq Ramadan, which they have been now for years, preparing all this. He was completely, there was a witch hunt against him in the media for years. They've been saying they have a double discourse. He's, a very dangerous person. So all this has been put into place for the past years to prepare this and to prepare the people and to make the people, scared to speak out on what's happening. We contacted many organizations. They're all saying, "Oh, this is not our job." Amnesty International. This is not us. We don't deal with these kind of issues. This is what we're being faced with. And this is why we're asking the international community to speak out. We're asking people from outside of France to question how the French people and the French justice system is dealing with this case. Explain to the French people that, people around the world are watching what you're doing, they're questioning, with the same accent, are not treated the same way.
I wrote an article about this case, and I was shocked that normally the venues that welcome my writing, British and Australian, didn't want to touch this case. I was told right out they don't want to publish something in questioning the legal process that Tariq Ramadan has been exposed to. I even got into an argument with an editor about the racial element and Islamophobia, and I said, you're ignoring the entire colonial history that informs these types of cases, and these are very legitimate questions, but and that was very striking to me. I also the silence of Muslim organizations has been fatal when it has come to civil rights organizations, because civil rights organizations, there are cases that they'll take on because they see the clear social policy purpose. And there are cases where they're not sure whether this is a private matter or an issue that should be elevated to a racial question or a religious prejudice question or an intolerance question, and they take their cues from the response of the local community to which a defendant belongs to. And in trying to get some attention by civil rights organizations in the U.S. and try to get them interested in this case, I was told by many repeatedly, well, okay, you care passionately about this because you've done all this research, but it doesn't seem to be an issue of general concern for American Muslims. This doesn't seem to be an issue that...
If I may comment on that, my name is Dr. Ahmed Sowa, the chairman of the Shura Council of Southern California, and we did have to deal with this situation. But the fact that we don't know anything about it, this is the first time for us to hear first-hand information from a family member that this is going on. We had no idea what's going on. We did not know where to go to find facts and find resources. Now we know things are going to change. Now we know the facts. Things are going to move in a different direction. But also don't keep in mind that when Muslim scholars and leadership trying to handle a situation, not only they care about their organizations and their community, but also they care about the family of the defendant. We did not know how our work and promotion of this cause going to affect his family. We did not know, are we going to cause more harm or are we going to make it more beneficial? Sometimes a good case or a good cause, if you speak up more about it, you cause more damage and more harm to it than the. So I think that's where the Muslim leadership in the U.S. had to decide which way to go. Now, when we, personally I'm speaking, when we hear that the family is pleading for and pleading for that kind of support, when we hear the fact that there was no admission from him to any kind of guilt, and it's all rumors and leaks from the other side, this has to be going out. This has to go out to the public, to the Muslim community, and I feel if that goes out, there will be a major shift in the direction that Muslim.
Let me invite people to coordinate directly with the family. I mean, now you've met Maryam, and let me encourage people to work directly with her. I know that the family is in a very tough financial spot. They have run out of money for the attorney, and you cannot count on a lawyer to continue doing a case pro bono. That's a horrible situation to be in. So not only do they need the moral support of the Muslim community for simple elements of fairness, but the accusers don't have to bear a financial cost. These guys are suspended without pay from Oxford, and it's a very difficult situation. And I think they need financial support. If I may dare to say so, because I think Maryam will not come out and say it, but it's a very serious issue. For him to have a chance to defend himself properly, lawyers need to be paid. It's as simple as that. Please go.
Is there a task force locally in Paris that has been put together by you and your family to? I know there's a lawyer, but then is there a task force that's working on soliciting help from the Muslim community, educating, or do you need help with that as well?
So in Paris, we don't have that. We have a campaign. So the brother, I think that he didn't get any information about the case. So you guys can follow our free Tariq Ramadan campaign. This is where it's the most up to date, and our campaign and our people are working on that. So this is mostly what we're doing from Paris. Working on the campaign and sharing articles, working in 3 different languages. Trying to get all the articles translated in English, because a lot of it is in French. So this we're trying to do, and of course, we need, as Dr. Abou Fadl said, we're in a very difficult financial situation. That's for sure. It's getting difficult on the family, but we also need your help. We need your voice. We need you to make your communities aware of what's happening. He's in prison for the past 6 months and a half. He's sick. He denied all the rape charges, and there's no presumption of innocence, and there's no due process. And the way we can only ask ourselves, the way the judges are dealing with this case, the only thing we can right now as a family can say is that he's a political. And we say that not on feelings, but on facts. The facts. How are the judges dealing with this case? The only thing you can say is that when you see that the more and more we're going forward, the more and more the investigations are showing that these women are lying. When we're seeing that from medical leaders have now said his thumbs are irreversible, which is going to come out of this prison handicapped. He's to walk, he's not able to concentrate, he's not able to write, he's not able to. I think at this moment, when we see that they're not taking either the judicial side or the medical side into consideration, the only thing we can say is that he is a political prisoner.
Just because you cut out for a second, the medical damage being done to Tariq Ramadan, unfortunately, it's irreversible. I mean, I don't think Tariq Ramadan, even if he comes out of this, he'll be the same. And from my perspective, I don't know how long we will have to wait for another intellectual of that caliber as Muslims. This is no small loss for us as Muslims, because it takes centuries and millions of people to produce a single intellectual. That's simply the way history works. And when we lose an intellectual, all the entire people that this intellectual represents lose with that. And I'm quite, I mean, it's not easy for me to say, because I wish Ramadan would come out and continue producing books and so on, but the medical situation is extremely difficult, and the lack of medical care, as someone who suffers from a lot of medical illnesses, I can tell you that for people who are in good health, it is hellish when you're chronically ill and you are forced to be in this type of difficult situation. It's an ongoing torture, and you know, I don't wish it. May Allah never decree that any of you see that. Grace, go ahead.
Somebody on Facebook asked if there is a link to donate money to help with the legal fees.
Maryam, you heard that?
Yes. So inshallah we can let you know that we can share it later. But please follow our Facebook page. It's Free Tariq Ramadan campaign on Facebook.
Free Tariq Ramadan
Campaign.
Yeah.
On Facebook.
Because they also circulate all the articles, updates about the case. It's a pretty good source of information, but I really encourage representatives of Muslim communities to coordinate with the family directly. I mean, I really was keen to have this so that you meet Maryam yourself. You know, as you can tell, she's very eloquent, very approachable, very intelligent, alhamdulillah, and there's no need for middlemen. Any other questions? Please go ahead.
First, a comment. SubhanAllah, when I first heard about it, number one, all of this came out at the helm of the Me Too movement. Obviously, we've talked about it, and I think that pushed a lot of Muslims, you know, not to be reactive in from that perspective altogether. Because in the U.S., the Me Too movement was blowing up like crazy on social media, in media, and everywhere else. Number two, lack of information was a major challenge. Number three, from my perspective, this was outside of the original allegation against him, that obviously hasn't had a day in court yet. It's a blow to a common Muslim to lose trust in their scholars, to lose trust in people of that caliber, that Muslims can produce that caliber of people from within their community, and that they would be good humans as well. Having that stigma attached, obviously unproven right now, I think it is definitely the duty of Muslim organizations and Muslims in general to bring about that level of education, so justice can be served, right? That's what we're trying to get at. So my question, this is a common question, is the Muslim community in France and Europe, how is their response over there? Number one. Number two, in terms of the lawyer and the legal team, is there a legal team, or is it just one assigned lawyer? Or are you guys looking for the best lawyer in France, for that matter?
Well, regarding the Muslim community, so it's true that we're having support, but we're having people are contacting us privately and saying we support you and we hope the best for your dad, and we have you in our prayers, etc. But it's true that this Me Too movement has silenced a lot of people. Like, a lot of people are scared to take action and to come out and speak on this case. So this has been a very big challenge that we've been facing. Now, slowly, since the 19th of July, when my father confronted Hinda Ayari, and her testimony completely fell apart because she has no more date and no more place where this supposed rape happened. I think this is when a lot of people finally got to realize that there's really something wrong with the way this case is being handled. How come after this woman's testimony completely falls apart, he's still in prison? And I think this was a turn. People are slowly starting to be more, speaking more about the case, but it took a while, and it's still. And then regarding the lawyer, so we chose the lawyer. We have one lawyer now, but it's true that of course we would like to expand and have a bigger team. But again, financially speaking, it's very difficult. We're talking about lawyers who ask between 500 to 700 euros an hour. So this is no joke, and it's been 6 months and a half. And there is a French saying that explains, a lawyer's job when it's a job that asks for a lot of work. So the lawyer has to deal with journalists. He has to deal with with one woman and all her her relationships. With the other case, it's cases that ask for a lot of time for a lawyer. So it's costing us a lot.
So just out of curiosity, do you have, knowing that this case is going to go on for some time, given that it's been 6.5 months and they've dragged this case so much, let's say another 6 to 12 months, inshallah not, but for the next 1 year, do you have an estimation of the legal fees that it would cost and other expenses, so we can have an idea?
Yeah, so we don't necessarily have an estimate because we have no idea how long it can last. We can't even predict anything because the way the judges are acting, we can't even explain why they're keeping long. We don't know. We really thought on the 19th of July he would come out, and he's still in prison. So we can see from the judges that they're trying by any means necessary to make this as long as possible. So because preventive detention is the only way where they can keep him in prison. Because if a trial really does happen, we know that the file is empty and that inshallah he will come out. So the only time and only way they can keep him in is now. And from what we are being told is that, in France, it can last for years and years. It can last for up to, even if they want to, it can be 6 years of preventive detention. We have no idea how long it can last. 4 years, 6 years, we don't know.
I did some research on preventive detention in France, and I was struck there was a case of a person who was accused of being a serial rapist, raped 8 women, and he was released with surveillance. It was an ankle bracelet and limitations on his movement. The people who normally get preventive detention in France are repeat offenders, people with several felony convictions, and also usually Turks or Arabs. But someone without a prior, with the same type of charges, this is the only case I've researched back 10 years. The only case that I found where the judges have refused any form of release on bail. That has been rather shocking to me, I have to say.
Professor, that's what I was going to ask. So, Assalamu alaikum, Maryam. My name is Seema. I practice federal criminal defense here in Los Angeles. And, I've represented people you would consider would be the worst who they don't get out on bail, but they don't go into solitary confinement. They're held pre-trial in detention. And so I guess what I'm curious about is what is the purported legal basis for keeping him in solitary confinement? I can kind of put together the pieces of what might be happening behind the scenes, but what's the purported legal basis for keeping him in solitary for these types of charges?
What are the explanation for keeping him in solitary confinement given by the French government?
So they initially said that it was an agreement between him and them at the prison that he would be in solitary confinement because, as he is, well known, it would be better for him to be in solitary confinement. So when we asked this to my father, when we finally were able to see him, he of course said that wasn't the case. So they're basically saying that if and so why then they're denying him, they're not letting him leave on bail. So we asked for everything, and we said the bracelet, we said we give him back, we give them his passport. He goes to the police station every day. House arrest. They refuse everything. They refuse everything. Why? Because on 4 different explanations. The first one is that he could flee the country. So they first started by saying that he could go back to Egypt because he's Egyptian. He has an Egyptian passport, and he could go back to Egypt. This, of course, is based on nothing because he's been banned from Egypt for the past 25 years. He doesn't even have an Egyptian passport. And then where would he go with a bracelet? Where would he go without a passport? And on top of that, he is, someone who's quite famous. Where would he go and hide if he was to leave the country? They then said that he could do the act again. So we said, if you say that he could repeat the act, it means that you initially think he's guilty from the start. Otherwise, how could you think that he could repeat the act? And then they said he could put pressure on the plaintiffs. We have no proof that there has been any pressure made on the plaintiffs except their words. They came out and said, the two girls said that they are not able to leave their houses, they're not able to go out, they have to hide because when they go out they're being insulted by people who recognize them in the streets. And then you check on Hinda Ayari's Twitter page and you see her, celebrating France winning the World Cup in the Champs-Élysées between like thousands of people. So you question, how can she be so traumatized and so scared to go out? It's only basically, and from the beginning of this case, it's their words against his words, but their words are taken as gospel. They don't question anything about what these women are saying. For example, again, I can give you an example. Hinda Ayari initially said that when she was raped, she was so traumatized that she couldn't, hear his name. She couldn't watch him on TV. She had to always change channel if he was on TV. And then we found out that just after the supposed rape date, she sent him more than 300 messages on Facebook to the point that he, blocked her, and she created another account and she continued messaging him. And she was messaging him messages like, I know you will never love me, but you will end up being between my legs very soon. This is the kind of messages that she was sending him. And not at one point the judges have questioned her, how come you say that you have never contacted him? And then we find out that there's more than 300 messages in his inbox that you message him, And this has been the case from the beginning. Everything these women say are not being questioned. For example, she had a conversation with one of her friends that is in the file now, conversation with her friend, where she says that the president of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, has told her that he would pay for the best lawyer in France if she filed a complaint against Tariq Ramadan. So the lawyer came out and said this on TV, and nothing has been done since. So he said either she's completely crazy and she's lying about this information, or there's something coming from higher up where a president tried to trick Tariq Ramadan, and then we have to investigate it. But nothing has been done, and this is all like this. There's all what the women are saying is taken as gospel and is not being questioned. And then the fourth reason of why he's not coming out is because they're saying that there could be a trouble to public order if he came out. So these are the 4 explanations of why he hasn't been out since, and they keep coming with the same explanation for the past 6 months. Every time we appeal, we ask for him to be released on bail.
Amir.
Apparently there is sheer injustice going on against your father, and I'm really sorry about that. But you mentioned that there was an inconsistency between what the accusers said about the time that they met your father, and what was the nature of the relationship between your father and these accusers, and if there was any, how is it being presented in the society?
Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. So for the first plaintiff, Hinda Ayari, he met her. He remembers meeting her after a lecture, but he's not even really sure where they actually met. But it seemed that she asked him a question after a lecture. For the second one, Christelle, he met her for 30 minutes in a lobby of his hotel on that day, on the 9th of October 2012. And it was for 30 minutes because she had said that she was a Muslim convert, that she wanted to ask him questions about religion. For the third plaintiff, he says that they knew each other, that they had a relationship, not the one that she said they had, and of course not rape and not violent as her testimony is said.
Any follow-ups or any questions?
Could you repeat the last one? The third one?
The third Mary, I'm just summarizing what you said, that for the third plaintiff, that there was some type of relationship, but it was not a sexual relationship. Not an assault and not a sexual relationship. Is that correct?
It was not what she said happened, yes.
She's a former prostitute, and it seems that perhaps he's trying to save her from that path, as a lot of good men try to do with women.
So basically, the background of this woman is that she was a prostitute, an escort girl for Sheikh Maktoum, which is the emir of Sheikh of Dubai. And she was also part in the Carlton affair. I don't know if you guys heard of the Carlton affair. It's the Dominique Strauss-Kahn affair in France, where there was implications with prostitutes and brothels, and she was part of this. And she was also known because she had tried to take money from an insurance company, and she was found out that she was lying, and she was trying to get money from this insurance company. So she was already proved to be lying in court.
Apparently, she
Now we have also proved that she told her brother and her sister that she did this for the money, that she's being paid to do this.
Yeah, I think what is it, the heart of the question is whether your father had a sexual relationship, a consensual sexual relationship with the third accuser, whose case was dismissed for insufficient evidence. I think that's what people are thinking. So, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, so he had a relationship. We don't know of what nature, but it's not what she said happened. So that's what we know for now.
Does anyone have any other questions?
I have a comment.
Go ahead,
Okay.
please.
It appears that Dr. Tariq has taken sort of a collective punishment for, perhaps the public of France and their feeling of being perhaps betrayed by the French Muslim population as it relates to certain acts of terrorism and so on and so forth. Of course, although Dr. Tariq is an advocate against all of those sort of things, and I can speak, Sister Maryam, on behalf of much of Muslim American leadership, that we understand that the attack on him is their way of effectively continuing to keep the Muslim voice down. And I don't know how to better express it than that. Not very articulate, but that's I don't know how to say it other than that. But our hearts are absolutely with you, your family, and your father.
Can I say something closing, and then we'll give it to Grace. I want to stress something. None of us are free from mistakes or sin. And to be quite frank with you, and and again, I'm uncomfortable saying this in front of the daughter of the man, but that's a situation we're in. I really do not care what happened consensually or did not happen. Because that ultimately is between the person and Allah. And Amar Allah himself. Our obligation as Muslims is that, especially when the consensual behavior is involved, is to help people conceal their sins and repent. And I'm not implying that Tariq Ramadan engaged in anything. Maryam, please let me be very clear. I'm not implying that he did do anything. But I am making the legal point that what I care about are the criminal allegations of sexual assault. Because if they were credible allegations, I would be right out there trying to get that person in prison and lock him up for life. I mean, I have no tolerance for sexual assault. But there are so many cases that after spending months of research that persuaded me that in fact what the point you made is that Tariq Ramadan seems to be taking a collective punishment for daring to rise beyond the bowing posture
Yes.
that Muslims
Yes.
are forced to take.
Yes.
We are supposed to bow before
Yes.
a certain race, a certain elements, structures of power, and those who break through, either you break through what emaciating yourself, becoming thoroughly secularized and a self-hating Muslim, but Tariq Ramadan succeeded in breaking through and not being a self-hating Muslim, being a proud Muslim. And I become convinced that no, it was involvement of so many French politicians in the prosecution of these cases, and the existence of net trolls who are flooding the air with all types of rumors, and my attempt to track down where these people are as human beings. I have students that study with Tariq Ramadan at Oxford, women who I called and had conversations with and about his conduct with them. I don't mind telling you that some of these students who have studied with him now for years are very attractive women. And if a habitual sexual offender offends wherever they are, he would have offended at Oxford for sure. And the fact that I don't have accusers from an area where he actually lives and works. I also called people in Qatar that I know, to know, because he worked with people in Qatar, to know how, and again, that, and knowing how the family is suffering. And again, you know, I've met Maryam just how long ago?
Just by phone.
Yeah, by phone. I mean, very recently. It's not like we've been old friends. So I think this is all an issue for all of us. It really a cause that we either stand up and be counted, or and the article that people had refused to publish, I drew a parallel between this case and the Dreyfus affair in French history.
Can you explain?
The Dreyfus affair was a Jewish police officer who was accused of treason and convicted, and there was no evidence, and it became a symbol for the galvanization of Jewish power in France, and Zionism eventually was born out of the Dreyfus affair. Theodor Herzl became convinced that Jews will never be treated fairly, that anti-Semitism is endemic to European culture because of the Dreyfus affair, and he wrote his famous book about the Jewish state, and the Zionist movement was born. Unfortunately, you know, I don't see the process so far of galvanization, because so many Muslims have suffered very deep injustices without this becoming a point galvanizing Muslims and making them wake up to to their place in history. And I pray to Allah that this changes, and that's why I decided to do this.
So I just want to jump on that, say that, I'm not blindly and supporting my father in this case. I've studied, I've heard what these the testimony of these women, and I can clearly see that we can see that these are lies and there are contradictions in what these women are saying. That my father has been denying these charges from the start. That I'm a fervent supporter of the to campaign. However, when you see that there are these testimonies, you can happen yourself at one point. You can't just blindly to women, especially when the more and more these days are going with them, the more you're seeing that they don't hold, and that there's a lot of contradictions and lies.
Now I want to take this opportunity to speak as an expert in foreign law and someone who knows a lot about the history of criminal procedure in the European continental context, especially the French system. They have a long history of interrogatory criminal procedure, which was based on the belief that the defendant or accused is actually a convict, someone who has committed the crime, and the prosecutor's job was to interrogate the defendant on that basis. They made some developments into change it to accusatory system. Now we are witnessing that the French judicial system now is returning back to his colonial roots and applying that interrogatory system against your father. The last point that I want to make is that the history of Islamic civilization is imbued with martyrs, with scholars who have been murdered by even burning or dismembered when they were lecturing. So I take this as some point of history being made for the Islamic civilization, and I pray to God that this ordeal is gone pretty soon, inshallah, for all of us.
Maryam, what is the best way for people to contact you if they want to get in touch and help?
So, as I said, you can follow the Free Tariq Ramadan campaign on Facebook. We're launching a new website very soon. And I can, maybe Grace, you can give them my email.
Okay.
And they can contact me via email as well.
Okay, very good. Is there anything else?
Not for me.
You can also follow us on Twitter, Free Tariq Ram. We're also active there. So look for the email.
Thank you so much, Maryam. I know it's late for you there, and we really appreciate you taking the time to tell us what's happening, and we're all praying for you. And inshallah, I hope that this session here will lead to good things and that you'll get more support from the Muslim community here, so and around the world. Inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Maryam.